Experience today with Dr. Joseph Michelli. It's such a pleasure to have you. Joseph, for those who doesn't know him, is a best-selling author, but above all this, he's a consultant and a speaker, and all the amazing books that he wrote on Airbnb, Starbucks, and all Mercedes-Benz, and all the ones you know from the most loved brands in the world. He did not only write about them, but he consulted many of them for many, many years and many other wonderful brands that we will talk about today. Welcome, Joseph.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure and my honor. When we had our little prep meeting, we said we wanted to talk about the trends. Your latest book, Stronger Through Diversity, came in a time where many things changed, also for CX, and people had to pivot really quickly. And I'm really interested to understand, after you wrote this book and all the consultancy you have been doing, have you seen new trends? What are the trends going on?
Yeah, I think we are really living Charles Dickens' Tale of Two Cities when it comes to customer experience, right? On the one hand, we saw trends toward technology and the technology roadmap zooming faster than people could have imagined. And I think we've advanced the technological experience for customers. On the flip side, we've seen supply chain problems and having enough humans available to actually conduct business. And as a result of that, we've seen a decline in overall customer satisfaction. So we have better technologies in the trends, and we have worse human service delivery and overall service delivery and pricing, supply chain breakdowns. All of that has led to a time when, according to one of the metrics, the ACSI, we are at a 17-year low on customer satisfaction. So, because of that, I think we've got now some opportunities and some expectations of customers that have changed throughout the pandemic that we need to attend to.
So understood, and I agree with you. I have seen the same, especially also with logistics and the difficulty in meeting targets, also in hardware, difficulty to deliver. What for you is the most important thing towards consumer to be able to cope with those difficulties, which is basically also new for companies? For example, before they had on-time shipping, or were much more able to be faster in reacting in some areas. In other areas like digitization, maybe not. But what do you think about how can we meet those new expectations?
I think first and foremost, consumers do give most brands a little slack understanding the context. It's not just that it's happening in one company and one brand. So overall, I think there are some expectations that consumers have lowered because they understand the macro. That said, you probably more now than ever need to focus on maximizing your operational efficiency on behalf of customers. So, many years ago, there's a Harvard Business Review article that says, stop trying to delight your customers. Well, right now, we need to stop trying to delight customers and just satisfy them. Now, I've spent my entire career talking about how satisfaction is not enough. Right now, satisfaction is not happening. So to the degree that we need to go back on the blocking and tackling, simplify our operations, reduce the complexity wherever we can, and execute to the fullest degree possible on whatever we offer. So you start to see more hotels that are reducing their occupancy because they don't have enough staff to deliver it. That's the kind of thing we should be doing right now. Instead of trying to meet pent-up demand and fill the hotel when we don't have enough staff to deliver against the experience, it's not the time for that. It's the time to execute as operationally successfully as we can on behalf of customers, which may mean that we don't serve as many customers as we wished we could.
Understood. And do you think proactive communication and transparency can play a big role in that as well?
I think it's any time the customer is is waiting, they're worrying. And when they're worrying, the worry doesn't stop with the one event. I'll give you a very specific example. I've had someone doing some renovation in my backyard. I expect there are going to be delays. I expect that things aren't going to go perfectly. What I don't expect is to be ignored or ghosted or allowed to wonder if it's going to happen. And the more I wonder if the next thing is going to happen, the more I worry about the thing after that and the thing after that. And I think once we start worry, when the customer starts to wonder and we haven't communicated before they worry, then we are in a very vicious cycle of distrust. And so, yes, proactive communication. Hey, we know it's not coming. The moment we know it's not going to arrive on time, I'm letting you know, versus we're hoping it might be coming and we're not going to tell you until we're absolutely positive it's not. And then we tell you. And all that time, you could have saved me, the anguish.
Yeah, absolutely agree. You have worked with so many great brands. And we all love them, we look up to them, we read your books because we want to learn about them. Is there anything still hard for them as well? And if yes, what exactly, or what part is hard even for those brands who are much more inclined in being customer centric?
Well, I think the first answer is it's always harder to stay excellent than it is to get excellent. And I mean that in the sense that you can create an urgency. We want to be number one. We're number two. We're striving to be number one. Take the hill. We're going to win. Then you become number one, and it's like, we've been number one for a long time. So what do we do now? And there's all these other people who are number two, are really excited to be number one, and they're striving to fight you off. So I think complacency is always an issue. I also think that, there's the great book that what got you here doesn't keep you here, right? Kind of thing. And I think that the point is that we sometimes believe, Polaroid believed that we were always going to want, pictures that were coming out of the camera instantly instead of digital. There's so many stories in the landscape of brands that stop listening to their customers for fear that the legacy items that made them successful, that's where their bread and butter is. And so they don't pay attention to new trends on the horizon that they have to be aware of. So I think those are two obvious examples. But beyond that, this is hard work. Customer experience is like rolling a rock up the hill every day and having it come back in the Sisyphus legend, right? You can't ever think that there's a destination. This is a journey that is tireless and so rewarding as you constantly work every day to figure out, what are the customers wanting? What are the changes? Are we delivering it fast enough? Do we have the right technology? Do we have the right people? Are our people inspired? Yeah, for me, the challenge is constantly reminding people that there isn't an end point. It is a way of life.
Yeah. And I want to go back to the part of listening to the customers in a little bit, but just to stay in the theme that we're just right now. I asked you, what is still hard for brands? And now on the flip side, what have you seen is something you see there is every time you meet those amazing brands or brands who are really wanting to stay on top of the game? What is what you see in all of them? Somehow maybe a little different everywhere, but a common theme.
Yeah, I always worry about answering this question, because if you don't have it in your company, you'll conclude, oh well, then we can't do it, right? So the best of class tend to have senior leaders who are fully in on customer experience. They don't just talk the talk, but you see them investing money to get a return on experience. You see them treating their team members in the way they want their team members to treat their customers. Those things are fundamental to the greatest of brands. And when I say that, there are some companies that have been very successful, even though the senior leaders are not all in. And the way they're successful is that the next level of leaders down are in, and they are constantly demonstrating that behavior, and they're leading up. They're challenging their senior leaders on a regular basis to demonstrate these behaviors. So yeah, and then sometimes you'll see organizations that fail when that mid-level group tries that for a long time and the senior leaders don't pay attention. And so those middle folks move to other companies and they make them successful. So, wherever you are in the organization, lead up, show the behaviors you want to see team members communicate to customers. And really, I think invest in this notion that unless you serve a customer, you're not going to have food on your own table and your lights will not be on. And if you understand that your job should constantly be trying to figure out how to create value for customers, then you get the game of business. If you think it's about creating profits for shareholders, the problem with this is it's not sustainable unless you focused on the customer first.
Damn, you now took my next question on, but it would fit here so well. And it's maybe it's also a tough one, and then we can skip to the next, or if you already said what you wanted to say about it. But it was exactly to talk about that. When you consult companies, you have worked with so many of their brilliant CEOs and CFOs, and maybe there that it wasn't at least to us, not so visible because you have written about the greatness of them. But I'm sure as a consultant, you have worked also with other brands who were not at that level. So what do you say to the CEOs and also to the CFOs? And how do you make CX visible for them, also in terms of euros or return on invest? What do you say to them to make it clear that there is a return, and how does it look like?
So I commit to generating revenue for the brands that I work for, right? So what does that mean? That means that any KPI that I have on the customer side has got to show some kind of revenue lift. Now, revenue lift or expense reduction for a company. So I'm going to look at what, if I have a KPI of first touch resolution, right? So how much is it costing you right now if customers have to call back a second and a third time to get their needs met? What percentage of the customers who come back a second time churn relative to people who get their needs met in the first? If they churn, what is the customer lifetime value for that lost customer? And what's the marketing cost to replace that customer? I'm in a constant war to try to show that customer experience metrics are not just nice to have fluffy, oh, they're happy, oh, we make customers happy. Well, I want everybody to be happy. I mean, I don't want anybody to be unhappy, but ultimately I want happiness to show profitability. And if it doesn't show profitability, then let's take on something else. Maybe we don't need to worry about happiness. We just need to worry about getting the product there on time. And decrease the dissatisfaction of customers, because dissatisfaction leads to churn, which leads to lost revenue, which leads to inefficiencies, which causes more expense. This is where you have to live in the CX space. If you are just about, hey, everyone, don't we want really engaged and loving customers? Of course, leaders will tell you that, but they won't invest in that. They'll say it, but unless they can see a return on that investment, they just won't invest.
Yes, agree. So coming back to our listening to the customer, which actually gives us also some insight on what to work on. I would like to understand your opinion on TNPS, and or what does it mean for you nowadays to listen to the customer in a more modern way as well, besides the well-established TNPS metric?
So Fred Reichheld, who created the NPS, is a friend of mine. So I always have to, do a caveat, because I think I'm always biased by just how brilliant I think he is and what he
Definitely.
did. The NPS has been misused, and Fred, I think, would say that as well. If you look at some of his current writings, he's really been championing the notion of, hey, everyone, this metric has value as a category, as something that creates categories of detractors and neutrals and promoters, but it's not the be all end all. And we've become obsessed by the score instead of the ability of the tool to generally categorize where a customer is. if you become obsessed by the score, if you incentivize people to deliver scores, you get very bad behavior and you don't get great categorization. So you get these 9s and 10s that you think are promoters when these people aren't promoters. They've just been, everything has been done to try to kind of cheat the system to get them to say 9s or 10s. So the metric itself is better than a lot of alternatives at getting a pulse for how to categorize people. But I would never, ever use any one single metric to try to give me an idea of where a customer is. I'm looking at their behaviors, their purchase behaviors. I'm looking at satisfaction scores as predictors of relationship. I'm looking at customer effort as a predictor of whether or not they're likely to stay. And so there's a great Salesforce article that just came out very, very recently that's looking at what are the major metrics in our profession. They surveyed more than 7,000 full-time customer experience professionals around the globe. And they looked at what are people using more and more of. And you're seeing an increase in customer effort metrics. You're seeing an increase in metrics that are designed to try to help us get under the hood of what do customers want from a tech perspective versus a human perspective. Those to me all need to round out what I would call a multimodal customer listening strategy that requires some survey data and questions like NPS, but also does focus groups, that observes customer behavior, that really, gets at subjective drivers of customer experience. So the long answer is NPS is a nice tool in your toolbox. It is not the only tool you should have available.
Yes, and I think the big challenge in that is to bring all of these metrics, which is very distributed around the business, into a cohesive and a well-designed dashboard that one can really use and deep dive into the customer's voice and then extract really the best out of it to work on.
And I think there are two experts I just want to quote really quickly. So Peter Drucker, the consulting expert, says, if it doesn't get measured, it doesn't get done, right? And then you have to put in Deming, who says, just because you measure it doesn't mean you should. And it's just because it's measurable doesn't mean you should. And I think the goal is to figure out, we got to measure things, but we shouldn't measure everything. We need to measure the things, the vital few that give us the greatest predictive understanding of our customers.
Yes, and also the correlations that you have mentioned to revenue and churn metrics, which is really awesome. So I also warned you that I wanted to talk to you a little bit about I didn't need to warn you because I think you have an answer to so many things that we could talk hours about it. But one that is close to my heart is, of course, it's one thing to work with brands that are really love brands, that you completely buy into their values, to the story, to the mission, that it's really close also to our human connections. And there are other brands who maybe doesn't sell products that are the most attractive ones, or more seen as commodities, or have a more a price war kind of competition going on instead of the experience in the middle. So talk to me a little bit, or elaborate a little bit around your thoughts. How can these brands also be awesome and maybe worth you writing a book about them?
Well, I just got back from Mexico City this week, and I'm working with a brand that's in the banking space for a lot of people who are unbanked, people who don't have any credit worthiness, who are buying retail products. These are not necessarily brands that are in like a Ritz-Carlton to create an elevated customer experience. And for a while, they were the only game in town. And so they just focused on operational excellence. But guess what? If you make a lot of money in any market, there's going to be somebody who's coming in right behind them. And they definitely have other companies now who are emulating the service model, right? So the only way you start to differentiate yourself as the competitors come is through an experience that is different. And it's doesn't have to be a Ritz-Carlton brand. Oftentimes it's simply figuring out, how do we add that little bit more that is relevant to our customers? How do we know our customers a little bit better than they do? How do we understand the moments that matter to them most and execute at a couple of those moments? Whether that's in the business to business or in a commoditized sector, it makes the difference in conversion.
Sorry, I have to ask you, do you also hear the clicking in the line, or was it just me?
I'm not hearing any clicking in the line.
Okay, good. Just, we can cut this part out, but I just wanted to make sure it's not on your side. So it's we can carry on. Okay, let's see. Where was I?
I think you kind of asked about how does this relate to brands that aren't necessarily the ones we think of as real customer rich.
Exactly. So Joseph, I have another question for you. Thank you for elaborating on that. How do you see the relation between customer experience and brand experience?
Well, I think that you can have a great customer experience that does not fit your brand. And so the goal is to create a branded customer experience. You want your customers to feel something, to think about your brand. For me, brands are what people say when you're not around. They are like people. They really are. Sometimes, I liken it to, if you invite somebody to go to Starbucks, let's assume somebody's never been to Starbucks. You say, I love Starbucks. Please go check it out. And then you go check it out and you come back to me and say, I hated it. And I go, what kind of people am I hanging out with? Right? I mean, they don't love my friend Starbucks. So which friend do I want to choose, the human or the brand? And brands really do take on that quality. They have a personality. They have a soul if they're developed well. And so the key is to get that personality and that soul to show up. So we have the operational excellence. We understand what customers want. And then we make sure our brand shows up at the arrival moment. So I'll give you a classic one. I worked with International Dairy Queen, and it's kind of a playful, joyful, celebratory brand. So at the moment of handoff on one of their products called a Blizzard, a kind of milkshake-like frozen treat, they tip it over before they hand it to you. Doesn't take much, right? It's a signature moment where they just flip their product for you and then they hand it to you. It's a little theatrical. It's playful. It is a branded moment in the customer journey. It elevates the experience and it brings the soul of the brand through at handoff.
I see. So when you go and sum up, when brands wants to find those kind of things, and what are the lessons, the 5 lessons you give brands that want to start to deliver 5 or 10 or how many you think it's right to share, for brands who wants to start to have a wonderful customer experience? Where do they start? What are the lessons? What is the recipe you give them?
Well, make sure you have mission, vision, and values. Make sure you have that. Make sure you understand the behaviors that need to be in place to deliver the mission, vision, and values. So call into actionable behaviors. Once you have all of that, define what you want every customer to feel at every interaction, whether they come to you through technology or through a person-to-person relationship. Understand what you want them to feel, because it's not enough to just execute a checklist. You need to make sure that they walk away feeling something. The more they feel connected to your brand, the more they enjoy that experience that you have tried to create for them, the more likely they are going to be advocates for your brand in the world. So understand what you want them to feel. From there, just focus on arrivals, departures, transitions, peak moments, pain moments. Stay focused on those sets of things, because we know that's what makes a brand memorable. Make sure you have a great customer listening program, that you link some metrics to your revenue, and enjoy the journey. This is fun stuff. It shouldn't be like we're putting bamboo shoots under your fingernails. This is an opportunity to change the lives of customers and make your brand stand out as doing something that serves them, that cares for them, that makes their life better.
Oh my God, I think I'll stop it here, because you gave such an amazing wrapping up last words. But here at Mission Experience, all my guests need to send me to my next mission. And I hope you can give me a name now for someone you think should be on Mission Experience, for them to share their insights and the lessons for everybody who's listening to be able to deliver a great experience anywhere, and about what topic I should be talking to this person.
So I have so many people. It's going to be really hard, but I'll give you one of my favorites. So in working at Starbucks through the years, one of the founders of Starbucks, as we know it today, is Howard Behar. Now, you probably know the other Howard, Howard Schultz, right? He's kind of the figurehead of Starbucks. But in the early days of Starbucks, there were two H's and an O, like water, H2O. Howard Schultz, Howard Behar, and Orrin Smith. And Orrin has passed some years ago, but Howard Behar is a legend. He's incredible at creating customer service cultures. He was the first to launch Starbucks outside of the United States. There may have been like 20 stores when Howard started with Starbucks. There are, tens of thousands of stores, and a lot of that's he's responsible for that growth. Massive servant leadership messaging. Howard Behar would be my first recommendation to you.
Awesome. Oh my God, I will be so much more nervous than I was today talking to you, which was already like, ooh, my head is still red.
I'm a good warm-up for Howard Behar. Howard's the main event, so I'm excited to have been here.
I'm excited as well. I can't really believe it. I have to pitch myself in a little bit. But Joseph, tell please, before we close, where can people find you? What are you doing next? Where are you going? Is there any speech that we can go? Are we waiting for any new books? I know you just wrote one, but I also know that you're very asked for the next and the next, or are you concentrating still on going through adversities? Tell me, where can you be found?
I'm in that wonderful place in my career where I get to choose what I want to do as opposed to feel obligated to do the next thing. I try to help a handful of companies these days that I really believe in, either as a consultant. I've been on more boards. I've been working a lot on the board space around helping kids be digitally well so they use technology for good and not get sucked into the rabbit hole of the internet. So there's a whole part of my life that is in giving back and being on boards. And then there's still doing consulting. The next book to be determined. I'm kind of waiting on that a bit. And I do a lot more speaking now than I ever have. So I'm out on the road doing presentations to organizations to try to help them either understand why or how to move forward in elevating the lives of their customers.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I couldn't be more thankful, and I hope to stay in touch. Thank you so much, Joseph.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.